So what do you know?
A lot more than I used to. I remembered more and know more as I expand. Thanks. This is a question I had formulated in becoming on this cruise, and that segues into this quite a bit. We have a son, my partner and I, and we've talked about him before, but the question I have about him is, in the middle of the night, at times he wakes up and I hear him cry. We do. And he's sleepwalking is the best language I can give to it. Sometimes he's actually out of bed walking or sitting up and crying, and I hold him, and he's almost seems elsewhere. And energetically, it's like I don't feel connected to him. Now I have the experience, my perspective, my best perspective of it is that I get to be the doting father who gets to go comfort him, but what's odd is that he doesn't really respond. It's like he's dreaming, and then he relaxes in my arms if I'm holding him, or then he just lies back down and I tuck him in. But I'm just kind of wondering what's going on. Where is he spiritually, energetically? Is it just some biologic phenomenon? I just don't understand what exactly is going on from his perspective.
When anyone sleeps, there is a withdrawal of your attention and therefore consciousness from this time-space reality and a re-emerging back into source. It's not different from what you call the death experience, just as waking up is not different than what you call the birth experience. It is interesting on the heels of what we were just talking about here. So when a baby is first born, as we just said, even though they are awake in this physical environment, unless they have already at an early age picked a lot up along their physical trail that is separating them from who they are, they could be awake or asleep and still be pure positive energy flowing through. We're just wanting to sort of lay a basis of understanding here. We want you to feel the well-being of the non-physical perspective and the sometimes lack of well-being of the physical perspective, just because in your physical form you can find things to fuss and worry about. So when you have something that you would call a sleep experience, and within the sleep experience you're having what you would call a dreaming experience, that dreaming experience is not happening in the way it feels to you. In other words, while you are slumbering, you have reemerged with non-physical. As you are coming back into consciousness, that's when you're translating all of those blocks of thought into what often feels to you like a whole night of dreaming. Even though it wasn't a whole night of dreaming, the translation of it happened in a much shorter period of time than you can accurately acknowledge in the way it feels to you. It's like the components of it are playing out so rapidly, and it feels to you because in your non-physical experience you are having an out-of-body experience, which means you're having an out-of-time and out-of-space experience. And as you come back into consciousness, all of that then is being reinterpreted. So if someone is having like a bad dream, they are just reinterpreting the difference between who they really are and how they really feel and how they are accustomed to being while they're here in this physical experience. Now what you're talking about is something that is a little bit different. In other words, this is not like he's waking up from a bad dream.
Well, he's not saying he has no memory of it at all.
What it is in he is not awake and yet not fully reemerged into non-physical. It is sort of an in-between place where he's in a fragmented way beginning to interpret through his physical format things that but he's not fully functioning, and so we would wake him up. In other words, when he is having that experience, because he's not in his non-physical state, he's not allowing that completely, and he's not awake in the physical, we would wake him up. We would ask him to wake up. We would wake him up. We would give him something to drink. We would take something, a cool washcloth or something, and we would bring him back into awareness. And once he's back into awareness, once he's fully aware, then we would soothe him back into his feeling of well-being.
I think that's kind of what happens is like I kind of, rush in and say, okay, Daddy's here, you're okay, and I pick him up, and he seems to become more present. But he doesn't really talk, or he'll open his eyes, but he'll look at me and make eye contact. But I think he does, and believe he's waking up, but he didn't really converse. Am
Well,
I
we
waking
think
up
that
further?
what's happening, we think he's working out in a sort of unconscious way some former feelings of uneasiness,
Yes.
feelings of abandonment a bit, feelings of unworthiness, feelings that he'd picked up along his very early little physical trail. And because his inner being is really, in other words, we're going to say something very bluntly to all of you. Your inner being is not big on helping any of you work through anything. Because as we said earlier, your inner being's not going to go over there with you and
Right.
help you work through it. Your inner being's just going to stay here as the standard of who you strive to be, and you just sort of have to find some way to come into alignment
there.
with it or not, you see. And so what's happening here is that the source within him is feeling this well-being,
right.
and something within him in his partially wake, partially sleep state is not in alignment with that. So he's not in alignment with that enough to get comfort, and he's not awake enough to get comfort from you. He's sort of in that in-between
Between,
place,
right.
and that's why we say we would wake him up. If we were standing in your physical shoes, we would wake him up, even if it means an hour or two of being awake, because then what comes next, as you are but not doting on him because something's wrong, just waking him up into your environment of well-being, waking him up into this world that is his now world, that is a stable, loving, good-feeling world. In other words, wake all of yourselves up into that. In other words, all of you wake up into that, you see. It doesn't matter if it's the middle of the night or the middle of the day. That's what you're wanting to emphasize. And as you do that, then your inner being joins your party here.
I had a sense of that. We were comforting him, and but I was wondering if that was part of the experience. It was lining up with feeling comforted, but he's not experiencing it. Please, not awake.
Here's the thing we want to say about comforting. Comforting is what humans do when they see someone out of whack. And your attention to his being out of whack is the reason that his inner being is not coming to that party. In other words, so don't wake him up to comfort him because something's wrong. Wake him up to come to the good feeling physical environment.
It's almost a sense of him comforting himself, but I mean, waking him up to help him feel himself, that he's safe and okay, just that how he is fine. Right. It's, as you once told me, I can't get in the boat. I'm in the stream, but I can't get in his boat and guide his boat. So I want to pay attention to him reassuring himself and feeling good himself.
And we think this is something you're all in this together in the sense that you're creating the environment from which he is having his thoughts and feelings. And it is from that environment that there is some contrast between what's going on with who he really is and what's going on with him there. And so the reason that we're having the conversation with you in the way that we are is because we want you to have we want your awareness to be that you want a good feeling environment in which he wakes up.
Okay.
A good feeling environment for him to wake up into. And that's really worth thinking about. In other words, if you're the greatest value that you can be for anyone is to be a catalyst for a good feeling environment in which they can wake up. You know, little kids wake up joyful almost under all conditions, you see.
Yes, he does.
And so we think it's something about that. We think it's something that you're all working on together. In other words, this is a good feeling environment that we're all wanting to wake up into.
Yeah, and there are lots of times that it is. The mornings are really it's just darling and beautiful, and you know, and sometimes there's a hecticness about us, like in the morning getting off to work and school, and sometimes it just flows really easily. I'm trying to focus on, if I focus on his ability to soothe himself and feel good, and our environment to get collectively being
Well, you
good.
see what you're helping us to say, and again, we're out here on this leading edge again. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about and feel, if you will, the feeling of waking up all tuned in, tapped in, turned on, the feeling of waking up into a bright, beautiful day, into something that you want to do, and a more ominous feeling of waking up in the middle of the night.
Yes.
And so, and let's bring this discussion into the arena of the way it feels. The discussion that we want to have is the merging of non-physical and physical. So the merging of non-physical and physical, we want that to be a more seamless thing. And there's something about the ominous feeling that it feels when you wake up in the middle of the night, that feeling that I want to be asleep. But what we're getting at, and we can talk about it more after a segment of lunch, we think that it would be a wonderful thing to be so tuned into source energy that when you wake up in the middle of the night, it feels like broad daylight in the middle of the day. In other words, when you wake up, you wake up. When you wake up, in other words, eager to be in life, eager to be into life. And there's something about wanting to go back to sleep that is the opposite about eager to be into life. And adults say to children, you need to go to sleep, you need to go to sleep, you need to go to sleep, and you need to stay asleep. Don't wake up too early and don't get up in the middle of the night.
Oh, we never say that.
But there's a clearly you don't. In other words,
well, we allow him. He gets up in the middle of the night, comes and we have our routine. He comes. There's times he gets up in the middle of the night, walks in the room, he'll rub my arm, our partner's arm, softly, and says, "Hi," and we'll walk him back into bed, but he's like, he seems like almost skipping back to bed, just like he's checking in on us. He seems to feel really good in the middle of the night.
What we're getting at, and we'll talk about this a little bit after lunch.
Okay.
So this is a subject that you've queued up for us. The subject is the blending of the non-physical me with the physical me. And we'll extend that blending into wake state, sleep state, and so on. In other words, let's bring life into the feel. As you're in your physical form, we want you to be. You see, the source within you never sleeps, because the source within you doesn't need the refreshment or the detachment from resistance.
That we have, right?
And
That's why we need sleep.
and there is so much emphasis on sleep because there is resistance. And a lot of the beliefs that are built around sleeping are because there is an innate knowing that there is resistance that you're trying to overcome through sleeping. And we want you to overcome your resistance in other ways other than sleeping. And then your sleep state will be a whole different experience. Are you sort of getting what we're getting at?
Yes, I feel really good.
Good time for a segment of lunch.
Okay, segment of sleep.
Yeah.